Hello, 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 and welcome to the College of Creation. My name is Dan.
And my name is Michael.
And we are Dungeons & Dragons DMs who love to homebrew items, spells, rules, creatures, and features for D&D. And this is a show where we make something new every single week. We are back to the basics, folks. We had a few weeks where we did some sort of recapping of old creations. We did some having some guests around, trying our hand at making a thing together. But we are back to just the two of us making things based on your prompts that you give us.
And we're glad to be back.
Absolutely, absolutely. This week, we rolled on our big table, and Michael, would you like to remind the folks at home what we were tasked with making?
Yeah, our prompt this week was quite simple, actually. Simple and open. It was to make a series of spells that required somatic components specifically. So more spells that are within the realm of somatic-only components. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That is not a prompt I ever expected or would have thought of myself. And that's great. That's the kind of the best kind of prompt, really.
So this is one of those things that brings up what I think is an interesting thing to think about in the game. Because if you look on D&D Beyond, you can look at all the spells, right? Here's every single spell. There are like 27 pages of spells on the D&D Beyond page. Each one of them contains somewhere in the range, on average, about 20 spells per page, right?
Yeah.
So that's many hundreds of spells.
Yes.
And then if you filter it down to ones that don't require a verbal component, you end up with 2 pages.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking like 40 max spells that require only or that don't require verbal components.
Right.
So it's not a huge part of the game. And it does, I think, bring up something very interesting. One, obviously, there's a reason for that. There's also then that creates an interesting reason for a spell like Silence to exist. You know, it's a great deterrent against spellcasters to be able to silence. But it does also bring up this interesting idea of like spellcasting then, therefore, kind of necessarily has to be loud and has this incantation quality to it. But I have had players who love to play with, characters and character archetypes that are maybe less verbal. People who like to play Kenkus, I've played with before, who have to find out interesting ways to make that verbal component still feel like, well, it needs to be there, but also my character doesn't speak in the way that normal people speak. I've played with somebody who played like an automaton, who was a robot, who had a weird voice box modulator thing, but so the way they casted spells was very different than what I think the stereotypical imagining when these spells are written is, which is a wizard moving around their hands and saying some sort of vaguely Latin sounding incantation.
Right.
Do you have any good and super cool flavor stories or ways that spellcasting has been talked about or manifested in your games?
One comes to mind. There is a player at my home table who is no longer playing this character, but I played at a table with him playing a different character at one point who was essentially a werewolf of sorts. We didn't really get into a changing mechanic. It wasn't really a changeling type of deal, but that was the flavor of his character. She was a cleric of Selune, and she was bitten in the throat by a wolf. So she had no voice. Anatomically, it was removed from her body. Mm-hmm. So she had essentially an always online prestidigitation, or a minor illusion, to act as her voice box. And the other players never knew. We never knew what her actual voice sounded like, because she was always conjuring her voice. Obviously, it's not an action to spend every time she speaks. It ended up being a very cool flavor And it never affected the game because it was just there for a narrative reason. But I thought that was a very cool workaround for a very cool origin. And I enjoyed it so much more after I found out what was going on.
That's very interesting. Very cool. Yeah. I like that kind of stuff.
What about you?
Man. I have had really creative players who are great at describing unique ways for their spell casting to look and feel, which is great. I love all of that stuff. But specifically, one thing that we came around on, specifically with a character who was nonverbal, communicated through variation on sign language. Not necessarily standardized, but still, was able to communicate. But in figuring out how to mess with the verbal components, we mostly came down to the idea of like, well, what's the important part about that, right? What's the goal, both from a game design mechanical standpoint of the verbal component, and then what's the flavor reason for the verbal component?
Right.
And the mechanical side is very easy to see. It's like, okay, it requires a thing, and then it makes it so that it makes sound, so it's harder to cast things quietly or subtly that are not meant to do so. And you need to be a sorcerer and spend sorcery points if you want to do it quietly. Or you're unable to do it entirely because it needs to make some sort of noise in order to overcome something like the silence spell, right?
Right. Right.
And then flavor-wise, it's literally just there's no definitive reason why something needs to be said, except for maybe you want to flavor it as an incantation, maybe you want to flavor it as something else. So I came up with a couple of different ideas that all of which I think are really cool. And I would say if anybody wants to bring these into any of your games, go ahead, because it's a very cool way to get around it. It still makes noise, but it's not reliant on that like ability to speak in that same way, and could potentially open the door to some other ways to manipulate or get around or create new puzzles, right? So one is like an almost Morse code style sort of tapping system.
Oh yeah, that's really cool.
Utilizing either like something within the hand or something on a bracer or something like that. That a sequence needs to be tapped. Yes, on a gong shield. But a very specific sequence needs to be tapped. Michael, are you familiar at all with like music from India and South Asia?
Yeah, like rhythmic tapping.
Yeah, so there's this rhythmic tapping
percussive.
That's part of how you count. Because the metrics are different than Western music metrics as far as we think of them. So the way you count is through these like really interesting hand tapping patterns that, if you learn classical music in that style, you learn and really internalize those hand tapping patterns, and they can be different for different styles and different forms and things like that. So somewhat similar to that in like these intricate and very well learned hand tapping patterns that need to be done in a specific way and in a specific sequence in order to cast the spell. So it sort of loops in the somatic with the verbal component, interestingly. And then another one was just like you have jangly bits. So like if you're doing components, you're casting with components and those components make noise. So I had a cleric that cast her spells with bells.
I love
she
that.
She had a number of like jingling bells.
Little hand bells? Yeah.
I don't actually know if it was inspired by, but it feels really similar to Garth Nix. Are you familiar with the Garth Nix books?
No.
So there's this Garth Nix book called Sabriel, and it's part of a series where this is a necromancer, and part of the art of necromancy requires these like very finely tuned bells in order to call to the dead and pull them back or manipulate them in some way. So like it's got that similar quality, right? It makes a noise. It's something that's still attuned to magic in that same way as a voice would be, but it's also not a voice. It is something, though, that functionally, for the mechanics of the game, it fits. It makes noise, so it doesn't make noise if there's silence. You can't make it if you're trying to be quiet. I love stuff like that, though. I love finding workarounds for things like that.
Yeah, I think it not only is very cool and very flavorful and makes players think and be creative, it's also a great face of representation. It's a very visual piece of media for people that are nonverbal, or even people that are very nervous. People at your table that may not be as vocal. There are plenty of players that I have interacted with that are severely anxious, that don't like to talk, and if you are a table that requires some type of verbal component out loud at your table, I've played at those tables before too. I think they can be really fun, but these types of flavorings allow those players much more comfort and an inherent place at the table, and that's great. Any avenue that we can take to further extend this very awesome medium to people that may have felt othered before.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
I'm all for that. 10 out of 10.
Always fun to find those ways to make it. You know, I'm just such a guy who's gonna be like, if a player comes to me with like, hey, I'm feeling like I want to flavor it in this way. Would that be okay? Can we make that work? And it's like, absolutely. Like, that's free. Like, flavor to me, always free. And functionally, sure, if something needs to need to figure out a way for it to work so that mechanically it still makes sense, okay, we'll do that. But like, the flavor is if that's going to make you more engaged with the character, if that's going to bring you into the world more fully, if that's going to make you feel like this character is closer to something that you will feel strongly about and be able to step out of your own comfort zone more easily, great. I'm all for that.
Yeah. It brings to mind the game that we are playing in together right now. You as a DM, I am a player.
Yes.
And I'm playing my photosynthetic soul sorcerer, which is very fun. In a way that I did not imagine I would ever do it, as a kobold with crystals growing on his back, like giant emerald crystals growing on his back. We just hit level 2, so I just got my sorcery points, and my sorcery points are manifesting themselves on his body physically as crystals that he can like crush.
Ooh,
and take their magic and use that to warp his magic. And I really like that. That's not what a sorcery point is. It's just an amorphous idea of what a sorcerer can do to make their casting more flexible. And that's a thing that I never would have thought of until the party decided we were all going to be kobolds, and I had to pivot away from my original idea. And here we are, using crushable, like breakable glass, essentially.
Very cool. I love the flavor of like the gems being like prisms to channel sunlight as well, in a way that's like even your own thing that you made all the flavor for, you decided I'm going to flavor it slightly differently. It's still going to have all the same functions. It's still going to rely on sun, but like it's taking that in another different way, which always great.
I'm interested to see once we get to the level where he needs to become a plant, what that's going to look like.
I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe we'll just shift it to elemental instead of plants.
Maybe. That kind of derails that whole leveled feature, but that's a bridge I'll cross once we get to it.
Yeah, we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, well, anyway, all of this is to say that I did have a good time making these spells. I ended up going, though, in a little bit more of the let's aim for fun, let's aim for a little bit of goofiness.
Me too.
That's where I ended up this week. A good exercise to get back to it, man.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I sort of struggled this week. I felt like I had a lot of ideas right out of the gate, and none of them really materialized how an idea normally does for me. And so halfway through the week, I pivoted to kind of a goofier, more fun, whimsical type thing as well. So it'll be, I'm interested to see how close we actually came to making a similar product.
Yeah, that's one of those things that like I definitely agree. I started feeling like I had to make things much more closely to what I was talking about before, right? Those like alternatives to verbal components, and do something that's like, ooh, isn't that cool? But then I was like, but that's just flavor. Let me just do that with flavor, and let me make this about something else.
Yep.
So I struggled to come up with the idea, but I eventually landed on what I came with this week.
I say let's get into it. Would you like to go first? We've had a couple strange weeks, so why don't we get back into the swing of things? You can lead us off today.
All right, sounds good. Go ahead and open your doc, and you will see immediately where I have gained my inspiration.
Yeah. This might, just looking at the title, I think that at least one of our spells is going to be pretty similar.
Which is fine. That's all right. Great. You know, these things happen. But I have crafted, how many spells do I have here? 6.
Wow.
6 spells, all inspired by the art of pantomime.
I love it.
These are pantomime spells, mimes on the streets of France or wherever the heck else you are doing those things. But pantomime is such a rich and interesting art form with a long history, and led itself into some of the, great art and film of, the early days of cinema, with Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton both being, they're mime artists, right? They are, their characters tend to not have any dialogue, even in the, text behind silent film sort of thing, right? Their characters are mimes, and they do a lot of mime sort of stunts. So taking all of that as inspiration, taking some of the classic sort of stereotypical mime stuff, but also the concept of mimery or the art of pantomime into inspiration here, we just have 6 spells, and I'll just go through them real quick here.
Perfect.
The first one is the Invisible Box. It's a first level abjuration spell. Casting time of 1 action, just on yourself, and only requires somatic components, and lasts for 1 round. You create an imperceptible 5-foot container around yourself until the beginning of your next turn. For the duration, your speed becomes 0, you become deafened and cannot speak, and no creatures or object can pass through your space. Additionally, any non-magical melee or ranged weapon attacks automatically miss you, deflecting harmlessly off the container.
I like this a lot. Yeah.
This
is great.
It's more or less shields-ish in some ways, but
yeah.
It's like a slightly stronger Blade Ward, slightly weaker Globe of Invulnerability or whatever.
This is the one. This is the one that's going to be very similar to mine.
Look, it had to be there. When you think mime, you think the hands up against the box.
Invisible wall, yeah, of course.
Anyway, then we have Deceiving Wind. If you've ever seen a mime, imagine that they are being blown away by a strong wind. You create an illusion of a strong gust of wind affecting only you. This is a first level illusion spell. Requires a bonus action. Requires somatic components and material components, a scarf or a bowler hat, and it is instantaneous. The wind pushes you up to your movement speed in a direction of your choosing without provoking opportunity attacks. It is functioning as forced movement because it's a gust of wind blowing you.
Yeah, an old shepherd's crook pulling you off the edge of the stage.
Yeah, more or less. Then we have the Unseen Rope, which is a 3rd level illusion. Casting time of 1 action, range of self, components just somatic, and the duration is 1 hour. You create the illusion of a long, heavy rope. You and any creatures you choose when you cast this spell can use the rope as you would a normal rope. When the duration ends, the rope disappears. Just if you don't happen to have rope on you, you can, create a thing.
You do
that
now.
Seems like rope.
Yeah.
It functions
Sounds
as
great.
rope, and it, yeah.
I love it.
I should probably dictate which kind of rope because I think they have different weight load-bearing capacities, depending on like silk rope or hempen rope. But I'll add that later. But the point is, the idea is this is just a rope that doesn't have any weight, and you can cast as you like. I probably should make it lower than 3rd level. I don't know.
I was going to say, I think that might be the only thing that I would change. Either bump the level down or extend the duration out.
Let's
8 hours,
call
maybe?
it 1st level, probably. Maybe even 2nd. I don't know.
You could increase, put it at 1st level and increase the duration based on upcasting.
Yeah.
Give it a little flexibility.
I don't know. I'll move it around a little bit.
I like it, though.
These were all pretty quick drafts of just like,
Yeah.
this seems like fun. And then I like stopped thinking about them immediately. They will definitely, I'm sure, come time for Compendium 2 or 3 or whatever, end up changing. But then we have the False Staircase, a 2nd level illusion spell, casting time of 1 action, range of self, somatic components only, and an instantaneous duration. You create the illusion of descending a flight of stairs while you are within a multi-story building or other leveled structure. As you move, you sink through the floor and appear 1 level below your current position. That's it.
That's so good.
It's like Misty Step Dimension Door-ish, but also stupid.
Yeah. I'm just going
Can't
down
take
to the
anybody
basement.
else with you, and you can only go down. That is notable. You can only go down.
That's perfect. Perfect.
Then we have Mimic, the 3rd level evocation spell. This is a reaction that you take in response to another creature you can see within 60 feet of you taking a unique action. Components include somatic and material, a lump of clay or putty, and it is a 1-round duration. Using observation and cunning magic, you prepare to copy another creature's abilities. You cast this spell in response to a creature you can see within 60 feet of you taking a unique action on its turn. On your next turn, you can take the same action without expending any components or limited resources and utilizing the creature's ability scores and modifiers or your own. If the action you attempt to mimic is a spell of 4th level or higher, make an ability check using your spellcasting ability. The DC equals 10 plus the spell's level. On a success, you can successfully mimic the spell, and you can cast it at higher levels to basically match whatever level of the spell you're trying to mimic. So it's, again, counterspell adjacent, but you're not canceling it. You're just saying, I get to do that too. But it also functions
self-twinning it.
It also functions as the ability to use a special attack or a special class feature or a special monster ability that otherwise isn't a spell feature or isn't something else like that, right? So like a Mind Flayer's Mind Blast, right? You would be able to mimic that.
That's cool.
I feel like 3rd level is good for that, but
I think there are specific places in the game where this could be a little bit too powerful for 3rd level, but I think that the amount of times you're actually going to encounter those things is so seldom that it doesn't matter that much. I think maybe you could get away with calling this 4th level.
Maybe, probably.
I think 3rd level is fine unless we test it.
Yeah, this feels like it's on the line.
Until we put it in a game and test it, and it feels
because
way too strong.
there's always going to be things that are like way out of line. Also, it should be noted this needs to happen on the creature's turn, so this can't steal a legendary action.
Right.
If you have any of those, it can't steal a lair action. It's got to be just a single action. Now, yes, there is definitely certain aspects that would be bad, but things like Dragon's Breath wouldn't be as useful to steal in most cases, because if you're going to try and turn that around on the dragon itself, it likely has immunity to whatever damage type it just spewed out.
Right.
So, you wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to burn the 3rd level spell to shoot another line of fire at a fire-resistant dragon.
I'm thinking about things that, like, really powerful features that some creatures have. I'm thinking, like, the Rakshasa ability to like make itself undetectable or things like that.
Ooh, yeah.
Very cool abilities that are all just like features and not actions. So I think that this is fine actually where it is.
Yeah, you're not able to take features, that's for sure.
The one thing I think may be able to really be exploited is if you're up against something that has like crazy healing abilities.
Yeah.
Like if they can take like crazy healing actions that aren't spells that you don't have to make a save for, that could be pretty wild.
Potentially.
But how many times are you going to be able to even do it? You know,
I think there's a possibility of pushing this up to 4th, or there's a possibility of instead of including the spell like ability check for you, throw a save attached to it.
Yeah.
I kind of like that less, but I think that might balance it at the very least. At least give the target creature the ability to resist being mimicked.
Right.
You know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. The final one here is Fool's Luck, and I added this one pretty last minute just because we were talking the other week about how much I liked this particular feature that I had added to a previous thing. So this is called Fool's Luck. This is somewhat inspired by all of the times that a Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin would get into a situation that is like truly terrible, and they're kind of an idiot. They are not the person who is like equipped and ready to deal with this, but somehow through fate, luck, stumbling into a positive situation, they still manage to make it out okay or be the hero. So that's what this is inspired by, right? You know, the building facade falling down and just missing Buster Keaton, who is standing in the gap where the window comes down, right?
Yeah.
Incredible stunt, by the way. That man did all his own stunts, like
We love
first take for the most part.
love it.
Guy is crazy. So this is another reaction spell, a 2nd level abjuration, range of self, components somatic. When you roll an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw with disadvantage, and the higher die rolls a 20, you can cast this spell to use that die as the result, rather than using the lower roll.
Oh, okay.
So when you roll at disadvantage and you get that result that everybody hates, which is that I rolled like a 5 and a natural 20, you can cast this spell in that moment, spend a 2nd level spell slot to... Actually, that does count as a 20. I've decided that counts as a 20. You're in a bad situation, you're rolling a disadvantage, but somehow you still make it work perfectly. Yeah.
Somehow. Yeah.
That's it.
I love it.
Those are my pantomime
love
spells. They could use a little bit of editing, but I do enjoy the space that I got to eventually.
I think that major props for making all of these within the same sphere.
Yeah.
I know that you love a theme.
I love a theme.
And I know the last couple times we've made something that could fit into a theme, you haven't quite gotten there, or it was more difficult, or you just chose to go a different direction. So I'm so love this for you.
Thanks.
First of all. Love this for you that you finally got to really hit the target on
me
a
too.
full sheet of themed things. But also this is like the start, like the budding start of a new subclass of something, right?
Listen,
like this
I got
is the
so
perfect...
close. I got so close to actually making a subclass instead of spells this week.
Yeah. I would love to see sometime in the future. Maybe we'll just self-aggrandizingly add this as our own prompt into our table. But a subclass of some sort that is based around subclass specific spells. That's the first thing I thought of when I opened this document. It's like, man, I would love a mime subclass, but only if it was able to use these spells explicitly.
Definitely mess with a mime bard. I think that would be a ton of fun.
Can you imagine a mime fighter that could use these spells?
That'd be fun.
How sick that would be in combat. Just like pop your invisible box and then you're just firing arrows out of your box silently.
But no, you can't pass objects through the space.
Then one of your class features, your subclass features, is you make
Should
a
be to get around
arrows.
that.
Yeah. you homebrew around the spell, Dan. That's the whole point of this show. Making things possible. Making the impossible possible again.
Absolutely. Well, tell you what. Tell me what you made this time around.
I made half the amount of spells
That's
that
okay.
you did. I settled on 3
Great.
that I think are very fun. Again, I didn't have a hard time this week. I wasn't like berating myself for not being able to write things. It didn't materialize as naturally as it normally does.
Sure.
But these are the ones that I came up with. So if you'll open your document, I called this sheet "Look Ma, All Hands."
Great. Top notch. Excellent work.
3 new spells, only somatic components for all 3. We'll start right up at this first one. This is a cantrip. I made an illusion cantrip called Closed Caption.
Great.
It's 1 action. The range is self, and it is instantaneous. By waving your hands through the air or over an applicable surface, you can communicate silently using only letters, numbers, and symbols. This spell can be cast in the following ways. You can create up to 25 words that appear in the air above your head. You can create up to 25 words that appear on a non-magical surface. You reorder the letters of up to 10 words that you can see and are written on a non-magical surface. Or you can translate up to 10 written words from a language that you do not know. All text created with the spell must be in a language that you understand, and all applied effects last up to 1 hour or until you dispel them as an action. You can have no more than 2 effects active at a time.
Oh.
So this is just communication based.
I love, especially the third effect there. I love that so much. How cool would that be to like have your friend like looking at a book and you just like look over and reorder some of the words to like tell them a secret thing that's happening within the room, right? You're like, that guy is bad, I'm pretty sure. That's great. That's so good.
It is a covert amalgamation of like minor illusion and message.
I love it. I think that's very cool and fun.
And I did look at both of those spells to see if I was too close, and I don't think that I am. I think this is enough of a unique thing to kind of stand on its own.
Well, and I think one of the other things about those spells, right, is that like they're very cool and they do provide some framework and some ideas of how you might use them, obviously. More like, I'm thinking prestidigitation and minor illusion more have like little frameworks that maybe you can use and make that work. But sometimes you wouldn't think of all of the things that might be possible. So to have another thing that's like, this one is specifically about words, presents an option that isn't explicitly necessarily there in minor illusion. Like with the right DM, like I would allow that kind of thing out of minor illusion, but to put it in explicit terms means that like you're not having to have DMs make that call, right? You're putting a different option in there that's like, that's what this is for.
Yep. Yeah, putting it back into the hands of the players for sure.
So good.
Moving over to the other spell up here on the top, I call this Clap Rally.
Okay.
This takes an action to cast. Its range is out to 120 feet, and it requires concentration up to 10 minutes. You conjure a pair of spectral hands in an unoccupied space that you can see within range, and they immediately begin to applaud. The clapping hands grant any creature within 5 feet of them one of the following effects, which is chosen at the time of the conjuration. The creature gains either a +1 or a -1 bonus or penalty to their attack rolls. The creature gains either a +1 or a -1 bonus or penalty to their saving throws, or the creature can add your spellcasting modifier to 1 damage roll per turn. Now, on every subsequent turn, you can use your action to conjure an additional set of clapping hands at no additional spell slot cost. In a different unoccupied space within range, the effect applied to the subsequent sets of clapping hands does not have to be the same as those conjured previously. You can't have more than 5 pairs of clapping hands conjured at a time, and you can upcast this at any spell level above 4th. You start with 1 additional pair. So you still can't go past 5, but at the initial time of casting,
you get 2 right away.
It goes up by 1. Yeah, 2 or 3 or 4
That's
or 5.
very fun.
So it's just applauding.
Yeah,
You're just adding an audience to your fight and giving yourself some boosts. Or on the other side, you can clap for your enemies and reduce their effectiveness.
It's got a very like audience from Super Smash Brothers kind of vibe to it, which is very fun. You know,
exactly.
you're just like
Yeah.
conjuring the
Yeah.
audience that's like Marth, 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 Marth. Marth just feels a little bit better about himself.
Yeah, exactly. Super simple, but pretty cool, and I think could end up if you sink 5 rounds into this, can be detrimental
Oh
to
yeah.
an enemy, or very, very helpful to your party.
Yeah, and if you're a caster who doesn't tend to do too many other concentration things, you know, you can keep concentration on this while also, you know, letting yourself do other things as well.
Yeah, I was thinking for this one, it would be great for half casters,
Yeah.
marshals that have a bit of spellcasting opportunity, like rangers for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe this could
Feels like a
attach
paladin thing,
onto-
too.
Yeah, paladins, rangers. It could attach onto a rogue subclass, rogues that use crossbows and things. I'm thinking you just put a bunch of clapping hands around yourself, and the whole time you're just firing off arrows, gaining +1, +1, +1.
Just such good rogue energy just to have like somebody clap for me, please.
Yeah.
You. Clap for me.
I am the main
Yes.
event. This is the main
I
character.
am the main
right here.
character. Amazing. That'd be excellent. That would be top notch.
Moving to my third and final spell today, I call this one the Lil Old Wall.
Little old wall. There it is.
It's the Lil Old Wall with apostrophe and everything. It takes an action to cast. The area is touch, and it lasts for a minute. You can hold your palms up vertically and create a 5 by 5 foot stationary invisible wall measuring 1 inch thick. The wall can be placed on one of the 4 edges of your current space, north, east, south, or west, and lasts for the duration until dispelled by you as a free action. You can add your spellcasting modifier to your armor class against any ranged weapon or ranged spell attack targeting you from that direction.
Great.
So it is a purposeful and permanent, a minute-long permanent shield that can't move. So it's not as versatile as shield, which gives you a +5 to your AC as a reaction, but it can kind of, if you can position it the right way, it gives you a little bit more cover if you just want to hide behind your little wall. I also added at higher levels, when you cast this spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher, you can create an additional wall on a separate edge of your space for every 2 slots above 2nd. So if you cast at 4th level, 6th level, or 8th level, you can potentially box yourself in and give yourself a total AC boost.
That's pretty
But
good.
at 2nd level, you get a little boost to your AC from one direction.
Yeah, I like it. I like yours, I think, mechanically better than I like mine. I even would say I like the spellcasting modifier as the armor class bonus, but honestly, it might even be fair to be like, it doesn't look like cover, but it just provides full cover from that side specifically.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
The thing that I'm wondering is if somebody was actually like up within melee range, this would have no use.
Right, yeah.
And I felt like that still needed to be valid.
Yeah.
Because if somebody's in your melee range and they go to strike you, if they hit something, they're just going
Right.
to move around.
Yeah.
So it felt fine to still allow up close melee combat.
Yeah.
Where it gets a little bit iffy is the diagonals. I thought about adding a stipulation for like half cover for diagonals, but that seemed really wordy.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a really useful spell. I need to iron out the details.
Yeah, I think it is good, and I do think it is better than mine. There's just like that little thing that needs to be worked out.
Yeah.
But it's right there. I can tell. It's right there.
It's real close.
Yeah. It's very good though. It's a lot of
Thanks,
fun.
man.
Yeah, like I really like closed caption a lot. I love a utility cantrip.
A very useful cantrip for players that want to delve into nonverbal characters for whatever reason they are nonverbal, but also has utility for characters that are not that way.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more universal than just I'm writing out the things that I'm saying in text form.
Yeah.
Well, that was quick.
That was pretty quick, huh?
Compared to our last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no. It's
like 4 weeks, 5 weeks where we've been
it is nice
pushing
though,
the hour mark,
Michael,
really.
to return to form a little
Yeah.
bit, you know? To get
Gotta
back
simplify
to
every now and then.
sort of
Yeah.
the simpler life. Gosh, we've made so many things. But I'm still enjoying
A ton of stuff.
having to think of a new thing. So it's good to get back into that brain space again. I wonder if I'm a little rusty.
Does it feel that way?
It almost
Do you
feels a
feel
little bit
rusty?
like I'm a little bit rusty.
Well, this will be a good ease back into the process. I think this was a
Indeed.
nice week we weren't required to make a whole bunch of stuff.
A little more of a softball. Yeah. Not bad. Well, let's see. Shall we roll for our prompt for next week?
I think so, yeah.
All right, so I have our big homebrew prompt table here pulled up. If you have a homebrew prompt you'd like to send us, you'd like to hear us make and tackle on the show, send that over to us. You can email us at collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com or come on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/collegeofcreationpod. You can shoot us a message there. You can also see all of our creations from every single one of our main episodes. And if you want, you can see our compendium. Our first compendium of episodes 1 through 10. We've remade all of the creations. We've proofread them and put them together in our first compendium. And you can get that exclusively on the Patreon. Michael, give me a roll.
That today is going to be a 6, Dan.
A 6 gives us a monster based on game terminology. I'm not sure what that means.
A monster based on game terminology. So is that like an armor class monster?
I don't know.
I can only imagine what a player's handbook monster looks like, where it's just a book, but it has every creature ability
game terminology
that it can use.
Michael, I'm not sure that I fully grasp what even I think this means, but I guess that I think that means that we'll both interpret it very differently and probably come up
It's
with
going to be
very different things. A monster based on game terminology. I guess it's sort of a meta monster, then?
It could be it could be a meta monster. So it could be something that breaks the fourth wall of the game.
I feel like I've already done that a little bit, but
you did.
You know,
I think you really did.
I'm gonna have to come up with a different way.
You reached the pinnacle of meta.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to come up with a way to do that differently.
I'm trying to think, because it could be like in-game terminology.
Right.
It could be established terminology from the community. It could be, TTRPG descriptors.
Yeah, could be.
Game terminology is crazy.
Huh.
Game terminology is crazy.
Also, is it just D&D game terminology, or are we also talking about like other things, like if we're talking about TTRPG design in general, there are a bunch of other terms that we want to think about: stat distribution and
maybe this is your chance to take all of your knowledge from the other games that you play and plug them directly into D&D.
I gotta go through and find the actual glossary terms, because I think about ideas a lot more than I think of the actual terms for what they mean. Like, what's the term for the way that a D20 is very swingy, and even if you're like particularly good at something, you can still roll a 1 and end up in like a low to middling space.
Yeah.
But your bonus is technically displays that you're actually very good at this. Whereas like other dice rolling styles, like if you look at Call of Cthulhu, it's a roll under mechanic. So you just have your stat, and your stat is like a 60, and you're just trying to roll D100 under 60 for all of your ability checks there. So the DM does not, or I guess what do they call it in Call of Cthulhu? The warden, the game warden doesn't decide the difficulty for a challenge, for a situation. Your character sheet decides the difficulty always. So if you're good at sneaking, if you're good at hitting things, you have to roll underneath it. But that's true for hitting something big or something small. That's true for hiding from something perceptive or something not so perceptive. It's very interesting, and like contested things work really differently. But that's a much better representation of if you're good at something, you're much more likely to succeed a much larger portion of the time. Than D&D, which tends to swing from bad results to good results pretty wildly and pretty randomly.
A roll under monster would be cool, where all of its attacks are based on rolling D100s. It doesn't roll any D20s at all.
I gotta decide what I'm gonna do with this, because if I'm gonna like use this as an opportunity to bring in other game mechanics into D&D in a way that's like deeply meta and does not synergize at all, I can do that, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a good idea.
Well, we have to figure out which avenue is best for both of us. We have to figure out. There is absolutely no possible way that we will make anything remotely close to each other next week.
No way, absolutely.
I'm going to call it right now. There's no possible way.
We may be landing on the week during which our creations are the most split.
The most split.
But I guess we'll have to see, you know? You never know.
I think this is a great prompt. I think this is very confusing.
This is a real brain stretchy prompt, man. This is a real brain stretchy prompt for me.
If this week was a softball,
yeah, right.
Next week
throwing me right back into the
fastest,
deep end.
Curviest of fast curveballs.
Oh, well, that should be fun. You know, I like a challenge, so
of course,
I'm sure we'll have a great time. In the meantime, we'll be working hard, and we hope that you at home have a lovely week. And we will talk to you next time. Michael, do you have anything nice to say to the people before we say goodbye?
Anything nice?
I mean, just anything in general. But for the most part, you generally say nice things.
I'll go with something nice.
Okay.
I had something really condescending and mean.
Okay, well, I'm glad that I caught you out on that one, then. I'm glad that I clarified.
It's good that you stopped me and rerouted me just in time for something nice as opposed to my original thought here. To anyone that plays this game, follow what you think is going to be fun. If you're at a table that's not fun, if you're playing with players that just, maybe they're not even bad players or bad people, they're just not playing in a play style that you like or you find enjoyable, it's all right to just respectfully bow out of that situation and follow what you think is fun.
Yeah.
Find something that unashamedly is a good time for you. That is always okay. To put your fun and your enjoyment and your needs first.
Find your comfort game. You know, it's out there. It's definitely out there. Well, Michael.
Dan.
It has been a pleasure, as always.
As always.
I'm excited to see what you make next time.
Me too.
Until then, everyone, take care of yourselves.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hey everyone, Michael here. Thanks for listening to this episode of the College of Creation. If you want to see our creations from this episode and all of our past episodes, you can find those for free on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/collegeofcreationpod. If you feel like supporting us further, you can become a patron and access a few bonus recordings, like top 10 lists, D&D related games, and conversations that were cut from full episodes for time. If you have any questions or a homebrew prompt you'd like to see Dan and I tackle on the show, you can send those to collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com. And our intro and outro music is by Fuserwolf. You can check out his content on Bandcamp and Spotify. Again, thank you all so much for listening.